Hola, ¿cómo estás? Espero que estés súper bien. This is Tamara Marie, host of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. Now, before we jump into this episode, I wanted to let you know about a special opportunity that you're definitely going to want to take advantage of, especially if your goal is to become fluent in Spanish. For a limited time only, my team is opening the doors to listeners of the podcast to take advantage of a free language coaching session. Now, in this session, it's not just we're teaching you about verbs or grammar, but we're really going to do a deep dive into what are your goals for learning Spanish, assess where you are on your journey to fluency at the moment, and help you map out a 90-day plan for how you can get to fluency. So we are going to help you take your Spanish to the next level, whether you're afraid of speaking Spanish or you just get a little bit nervous when you're talking to native speakers, or maybe you've got some of the basics down, but you really know that you struggle with getting your Spanish to flow and your listening skills aren't up to par. Whatever it is, even if it is a specific grammar issue, we will help you map out how to tackle that. And normally these sessions do cost, so we are offering a few slots for free. There are limited spaces available and they'll only be open up through the end of the month. So make sure you sign up. Go to SpanishConSalsa.com/coach. That's SpanishConSalsa.com/coach to book your free language coaching session where we will help you map out a 90-day plan to get to Spanish fluency. Okay, let's get started with the episode. Bienvenidos a nuestro último episodio de 2021. Welcome to our final episode of the year 2021. In this episode, we will be reviewing the most popular episodes from this year, and you never know, there might just be one on our list that you missed. So make sure you stick around to see if one of your favorite episodes made it to our top 10 list. Vamos a empezar. Let's get started.
Bienvenidos! Welcome to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast, the show for Spanish learners that love music, travel, and culture. Close your grammar textbooks, shut down the language apps, and open your ears to how Spanish is spoken in the real world. Let us show you how to go from beginner to bilingual. Here is your host, certified language coach, Tamara Marie.
Hola mi gente, bienvenidos al episodio 142. Welcome to episode 142 of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. Wow, I cannot believe it. The year 2021 is about to end. And sobrevivimos, we survived. I keep saying that because it's true. So much has gone on over the past year. And I wanted to take this opportunity at the end of the year to thank all of you who have been listening to the podcast, who have supported us throughout the year. And I wanted to also give a shout out to a listener who left a review. But before I do that, I wanted to let you guys know about some really big news for all podcasts. This one included. Spotify is now doing podcast reviews. So if you know, if you listened to the show before, you know I usually ask you to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. But now Spotify also has the ability for you to review the show. So if you are listening to this podcast on Spotify right now, if you're the first person to leave a review, we have a free gift for you. Actually, you know what? We're going to do it for the first 5 people that leave us a rating and review on Spotify. We will send you a free gift directly from us. To get your gift, just leave the review. Make sure you send us a screenshot of that. You can email it to us directly at host@learnspanishconsalsa.com. Also, for a bonus gift, if you actually take a screenshot of your review, post it on Facebook or Instagram, and tag us in the post. So we're on Instagram at LearnSpanishConSalsa. You can post us or post an IG story. As long as you tag us there and have a screenshot of your Spotify review, we can also DM you there and we can get your info so we can send you your gift. If you are going to do it on Facebook, you can just tag us. We are on Facebook as Spanish con Salsa. You can tag our business page there and send us that screenshot of your Spotify review. I'm super excited about this because actually our top 10 list of our top 10 episodes of the year actually comes from Spotify. Just as a podcaster, you know, we're able to get a lot better metrics from Spotify. So we kind of get more information from you all about where you're listening from and what episodes that you like the most. So I am actually going to be reviewing the top 10 list based on our Spotify downloads of our most popular episodes for 2021. So before I do that, though, I do want to share with you one of our listener reviews. This actually is one that came from Apple Podcasts, but I do want to share it with you because I think it's such a great review. So I'm going to shout out to Paleo Suz, Paleo Suzz. She left, or he, I believe it's a she, I'm not sure. They left a review that says, Buenísimo. This podcast has really kept me motivated and has given me great ideas to improve my Spanish. Not to be overly dramatic, but it actually changed my life by recommending a language exchange app. I met a great friend from Argentina through the app, and we've been talking every day in Spanish and English for a year now. Muchísimas gracias. De nada, Paleo Suz. Thank you so much for that 5-star rating and review on iTunes. And how cool is that you were able to meet a friend in Argentina and you've been talking to them for over a year. And to me, that's a real power of learning Spanish and becoming fluent in the language. It's not just, to have this skill, something to put on your resume, but it's the people that you get to connect with. Through being able to speak another language, it's almost like a superpower, right? You're able to connect with people that you wouldn't have been able to before. So in the example of our listener, Paleo Suz, just connecting with someone through this love of language, through wanting to learn, to actually being curious about it and wanting to connect with people. She's made a year-long friend. And she got that from listening to the podcast. So thank you so much for that review. And I hope for all of you that you are continuing to practice Spanish on a regular basis, because as you know, that is the real key to fluency. You can't just sort of learn the language once and then say, okay, now I'm fluent. Check that off my bucket list. Now I'm on to the next thing, right? You have to constantly practice the language by speaking it, communicating with real people, and actually making it a part of your daily life. That to me is the last step, because this is an ongoing journey. To me, learning is a lifelong journey. Learning languages is a lifelong journey. You'll never know everything. So that's the beauty of it. So you can continue to learn and to connect with people and grow and develop through your passion for language. So thank you so much for that review. And once again, if you want to be one of our first 5 reviewers on Spotify, definitely send us that DM on Instagram, tag us in your post at Learn Spanish con Salsa, or tag us on Facebook and send us a message there, and we will make sure we get you a free gift, right? Well, I guess gifts are always free. I think when people say that, a free gift, like a paid gift, no one has a paid gift. But anyway, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love for you to be one of our first Spotify reviewers. And if you've already submitted a review on Apple Podcasts, there's no worries there. You can still submit a review on Spotify if you're listening to us on that platform. Okay, so now let's get into it. Let's talk about the top 10 episodes of the year 2021. And I have to say, some of these actually surprised me. I will be sharing as well some of my favorite episodes from the year. And quite honestly, all of the ones that were my favorites didn't necessarily make the list of the most popular or most downloaded episodes. So that is something that I will keep in mind in the future, but I will also be sharing with you all some of the conversations that I've enjoyed having through the podcast. It's actually been a really great opportunity to connect with people and to bring you voices from all over Latin America, not only, authors and other language teachers, other bilinguals, but, people who are actually in the music industry or actually are teaching Latin dance. We've had a lot of great conversations this year. So as we reflect on that, let's get to that top 10 list. Let me give you a breakdown. Of course, I will start with number 10. So we'll start with number 10. We'll go all the way up to number 1 to the most downloaded episode of the year, according to Spotify. So our 10th most downloaded episode, number 10 on our list of our most popular episodes of 2021, is actually episode 128 that we released back in June. And the topic was how to 10x your Spanish vocabulary with audiobooks. And I really did enjoy bringing this topic because listening comprehension is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I think that sometimes we overlook certain resources that can be very helpful. So we talked about how to use audiobooks. We've also talked in the past about how to use music and other sources to improve your listening comprehension. But episode 128 was a great episode where I shared a specific technique that you can actually use audiobooks not only to improve your listening comprehension, but to also exponentially increase your Spanish vocabulary. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, if you missed that one back on June 15th, make sure you go back and check out episode 128 and learn my method for using audiobooks specifically to improve your Spanish vocabulary. Number 9 is episode 118, which is learn 3 ways to say to have in Spanish using timba. So this is a type of music from Cuba, and I actually did a breakdown of the lyrics from the song Me Dicen Cuba in that episode, and this was actually released back in April. And I have to say that these are always my favorite episodes to do. I love music and kind of breaking down a song and not just kind of explaining what the lyrics mean, but also pulling out those things that you can use in your day-to-day conversations has really been one of the things I really love to do on this podcast, and really is what helped me learn Spanish as well. So that was our 9th most popular episode. And I will have to say a lot of these episodes that are on our top 10 list actually are episodes with songs. So I think that in 2022, you'll be hearing more episodes with different music and using that more to kind of pry out the Spanish that you can use in your conversation. So it seems like those were the most popular ones, at least on Spotify. Number 8 is learn how to use the preposition de with music. And in that episode 114, I broke down the lyrics to the song Medicina de Amor. And you know, de is in the title, so Medicina de Amor, medicine of love, or love's medicine. So we talked about some different ways to use that preposition de, because I think a lot of people just think it means from, right? It's from. And it does, but it also can be used in different ways. So I broke that down in episode 114. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, make sure you go back and listen to it, and you'll get some tips on how to use that preposition that you may not have known. Number 7 on the list is how to stop forgetting the Spanish you've learned. And that was episode 139. And actually, you know, this was a topic that came to us because it was more of a Q&A, right? Like, a lot of people ask this question. It's like, look, I've been learning Spanish for a while. I know I've learned a lot, but I keep forgetting everything. You know, I get into a conversation and I get absolutely stuck. I don't know what to say next. So in episode 139, I break down some strategies for how you can stop sort of that, I guess, the leaky faucet, right, of your memory, where everything that goes in is just kind of going out the other side. So if that was one you missed, make sure you go back and listen to that. And we just released that back in October, so make sure you check that episode out as well. Our 6th most popular episode of the year is one that we actually did an encore presentation of back in October. We originally released this episode was actually a conversation with author Leila Cobo, who wrote a book called Decoding Despacito. And that was a really great conversation. It's a way that you can practice your listening comprehension as well. The interview was bilingual, so we did some English. We also had some conversation in Spanish. But the thing I love about my conversation with Leila is that she was able to share some behind the scenes stories of some of my favorite artists. And, you know, quite frankly, some of the artists that, you know, we talk about on this podcast all the time, from Juan Luis Guerra to Marc Anthony. It's just amazing, just the insight she had. And for those of you who missed that episode, make sure you just kind of go back and check out the episode on celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. Just do a search for that, or you can do a search for Decoding Despacito, which you probably are very familiar with that song. It's one of the first songs I broke down here on the podcast, one of our first episodes. But Leila is amazing because in her position as the vice president of Billboard Latin, the Latin division of Billboard Records, she really has this access and insight to get these artists to open up and share the stories behind their songs, which to me is so powerful and so meaningful because, you know, this music is a part of all of our lives, right? You listen to a song, it becomes very personal for you, but you don't always know what the artist had in mind or what was the story behind how it came about, especially those songs that became hit records, right? It's so interesting. So she provides so much insight, so many amazing stories. And also I give a playlist in that episode. So if you're on Spotify, that you can actually listen to all of the songs that she mentions in her book, Decoding Despacito. It's not just reggaeton. She has lots of different genres that she covers, even the song Macarena. Crazy story behind that. Definitely recommend, if you don't have Layla's book, to make sure you grab it. But anyway, that was our 6th most popular episode of the year, where we talked about Decoding Despacito. All right, now we're into the top 5. All right, number 5 is the smart way to master the past tense. And that was episode 131. So it seems like you guys really like the topics that are more grammar related, which, to me, I find grammar only interesting when I can use music to explain it or something more interesting. Because I think with grammar, it's really important to learn it in context, right? Just kind of getting a book and saying, all right, I'm going to learn all the verb tenses. I'm going to learn how to structure sentences. It's actually, it's not horrible, but to me, it can be quite boring. And if you're bored, you will definitely forget what you're learning, if you even retain it to begin with. So to me, it's just a much more interesting way to use real life materials to illustrate the way people actually use grammar and speak in real life. Because grammar is just the proper structure of a language. It doesn't give you the emotion, the meaning, the feeling. It does communicate some meaning, right? Like past, present, or future tense, for example. But it's really just the form in which you say things. So it's just not the primary focus in my mind of language learning. Obviously, you need to learn grammar, right? Because you want to be able to speak properly, but you have to have something to say too, right? So grammar, I think, is one of those things that people approach in a very, studious way, where they feel like I have to get all this right and I have to be perfect with my grammar before I ever speak. And in this episode, I think I mentioned, but I say this a lot when I'm talking to Spanish learners, that listen, all native Spanish speakers don't have perfect grammar. Even us as speakers of English, right? Like, we don't speak perfectly all the time. If you were to give most of us a grammar test, we probably wouldn't do as well as we think, right? But we're native speakers of English, right? A lot of us that listen to this podcast, right? So I think it's really interesting, that perspective on grammar. But if that's what you guys are interested in, I can definitely provide you with more in 2022 that gives you a breakdown of grammar in a little bit different way, but also more effective. And of course, using music. Okay. So episode 131, we talked about the smart way to master the past tense. So if you struggle with the past tense, that's a good episode to check out to see sort of how we approach it at Spanish con Salsa, because I think you might find some of those tips a little bit surprising. Definitely different than what you may have been told to do before. All right, episode number 109, which was our 4th most popular episode of 2021, is the secret to unlock your Spanish listening skills. And this was an interview I did with Daniel Reynaud of Jive World, and they created the app Lupa, which is a very innovative way to practice your listening comprehension through stories from all around Latin America. Now, they started out with the Lupa app over at Jive World, and that actually allows you to listen to all of the amazing content provided by the team of journalists over at Radio Ambulante, just like Wandering Radio. So they actually do tell stories all around Latin America. And for those of you who are podcast fans or who listen to NPR, then you might be familiar with This American Life. And so I kind of would call, sort of, if you haven't heard Radio Ambulante before, I would sort of call it like the This American Life of Latin America. They actually had a live event in DC pre-COVID times, and I was actually able to sort of see some of the team that works on that amazing podcast in the flesh, right? Live, doing their thing. So amazing stories there, amazing content, and also a very innovative way to practice your listening comprehension. So make sure you check out episode 109 to hear my conversation with Daniel. He talks a little bit about how they came up with this concept and how he, as a language learner himself, was able to provide some real input into coming up with this innovative way to improve listening comprehension. So really great conversation with Daniel. So I definitely recommend you check out episode 109 if you haven't already. That was actually released back in February, so at the beginning of the year. So that's one that you may have missed, especially if you're a newer listener to the podcast. So make sure you go back to check out episode 109. All right, we're down to the top 3. All right, the third most popular episode of 2021 is Why Living Abroad Won't Help You Get Fluent, Andrea's story. This was episode 137 from back in August, and this was actually an interview I did with a member of our Spanish con Salsa community. Andrea is a member of our Spanish Fluency Club, and she shared her experience there. The thing I really liked about my conversation with Andrea is, she talked about how she spent 10 years trying to learn Spanish and traveling and, trying to immerse herself in the culture, and how that helped her in some ways, but in other ways really didn't help her get fluent. And I think it's just a really interesting perspective, and a lot of you might relate to that. I know I certainly have had experiences where I've traveled and, while I'm in the country, I'm forced to speak Spanish. But the minute I come back home, it's like, wow, well, what do I do with all of that Spanish that I acquired while I was traveling? How do I keep it up? So I think Andrea gives some great tips for how she has been able to successfully do that. And she continues to make progress each and every week. So I think you will definitely enjoy and relate to Andrea's story in episode 137. Our second most popular episode of the year was Learn Spanish Verbs with Music with the song Tu Amor Me Hace Bien by Marc Anthony. That was episode 133. And our number 1 most popular episode is another episode where I break down a song, and it's another Learn Spanish Verbs with Music. This time it's episode 107, and I actually broke down the lyrics to the song El Día de Mi Suerte, which is a classic salsa song. It's basically My Lucky Day. You can loosely translate it to that. It's a great, great song. We talked a little bit about some of the verbs that are used in that song. So definitely make sure you go check out episode 107 if you haven't already, because it is the most downloaded episode of the year. So I'm sure that if you haven't already listened to it, that you'll definitely find it to be useful, to be interesting. And if you haven't listened to the song El Día de Mi Suerte, make sure you do yourself a favor. Go to learnspanishconsalsa.com/107, and you'll be able to not only listen to that episode, but to actually listen to the song El Día de Mi Suerte. It's just a classic song if you are a lover of music. All right, that is it for this episode. I want to say again, thank you all so much for listening to the podcast, for supporting us through this crazy year 2021. There will be more to come next year. I'm very excited about bringing you all some more content, some just more fun and innovative ways to master the Spanish language. Because, I say this all the time, but learning Spanish does not have to be boring. Just because we're learning grammar does not mean that we have to be, spending hours with our noses buried in textbooks. This language is alive. The people who speak it are vibrant, and you definitely don't want to approach it in a strictly academic way. So we will be bringing you more content to come in 2022, and make sure you're one of those first 5 listeners on Spotify to leave us a rating and review. And don't forget to tag us on Instagram at Learn Spanish con Salsa, or to tag us on Facebook as the company or business page Spanish con Salsa. As always, I hope that something you have heard on the podcast in 2021 has helped take you one step closer from Spanish beginner to bilingual. Hasta la próxima.
Thank you for listening to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast at learnspanishconsalsa.com.